The Beyond the Call of Duty is a book about a few Britishers, mostly young men who came to India for a career. No, not the big names, not the Hastings and the Clives and the Macaulays of the world, but youngsters who just came to make a career and went way beyond their normal work and have left a legacy which exists till today, and not many of us know about the amazing work that they did or what inspired them to do that and so on. For instance, few of us know who created Asiatic Society or who created the brand name of Darjeeling tea, or who worked assiduously to do away with the Thuggy system in India, or raised their voice against the Sati system, or the initial guys who wanted to put in the railway lines only for the British interests, who were the guys who opposed them and said that no, we needed a network of lines more for the Indian populace. So the book is a story of a variety of people over the last 200 years. Even Ronald Ross, who worked on malaria in India, and none of them were acclaimed names in their time. They have left a legacy by the quality of the work that they did. They fell in love with India, they fell in love with Indians, and they contributed way beyond the call of their duty, and that hence the title of the book. We have covered about 12 or 13 people totally in about 10 chapters, because some of them who were brothers have been clubbed together, like Cunningham brothers. There are 3 of them, so they get clubbed together, and 2 other people in the railways, Chapman and Sleeman, who are covered together. But there are 10 chapters otherwise, and only one living Englishman, which is Mark Tully, who has been included more because he is technically still a Britisher, though he has made India his home. That makes him an India lover, and he has projected India to the world with a sense of empathy, and that is what qualified him to be there as an India lover. But otherwise all the rest of them are from the British Raj, and almost 100, 150, 200 years ago. You see, the whole genesis of the book owes itself to one of my lunches with a very good old friend who was N.J. Yashasvi, who started this ICFAI, Institute of Chartered Financial Analysts of India, who was the father who spawned it, and today you have those ICFAI business schools and university and so on. So we were just talking one day when he talked about this as a book idea, which in a weak moment I said, oh yeah, sure, why not? But then he was following it up pretty assiduously, and I was trying to do some chapters, and then it was going very slow because I was caught up with the other books and so forth. And then unfortunately 3-4 years ago he died. And then I said, since I had started on the work and it was suggested by him, who was a very scholarly person, I thought I will finish the book. So that's when I also took a co-author, because I'm not fundamentally a historian and the research was taking enormous amount of time. So I took a co-author. But there is no scientific basis. It's not as if we had a population of names and then we selected out of it. But we did a lot of search in terms of trawling through the websites, trying to see. We didn't want already enormously famous names, but we wanted names who had really done significant work, not civil servants doing a great job of being a civil servant, but people who were doing things which was not their normal call of duty, like Darjeeling tea is done by a surgeon. If you talk about James Prinsep, who was an essay master in the mint. Essay masters are the ones who look at the gold content in the coins minted by the mint. He is building a bridge in Benares and painting, doing drawings of Benares and making sure that the water doesn't get clogged and flood the city. None of that was part of his job. So of this kind, we looked at a lot of stories and picked up those that seemed to appeal to us. In that sense, technically it is possible that there may be names which ought to have been included but may have got left out. But then, our idea was basically to tell some inspiring stories. The idea was not that it has to be an exhaustive work on every one of that kind, because then the canvas becomes so large that you can't ever fill it really. India as a country and Indians as a people. They, not coming as a ruler, but people who empathized with India, understood India, fell in love with Indians, and did more than what they were required to do. I will mention it in a very broad terms. The chapter itself was written by, that particular chapter was written by my co-author, but the broad thing that we wanted to bring out is, it's not true that every one of the engineers of the British Raj were involved in laying lines only to take the raw material out to the coasts so that they could take the Indian raw material out to their own country, because that is a popular perception that we normally have of how British built the Indian railways. And here we talk about these guys fighting with their own masters, their own administration, asking for larger budgets, asking for connections which have nothing to do with their raw material requirements, but saying that, look, this is the Indian population, and we have to make life easier for them, and if you don't have the lines here, the people will have great deal of difficulty, things of those kinds. And also we must understand that today, for example, the total kilometers of lines in India of railways is about 75-80,000 kilometers. And in 1947, when the British left, it was almost 50,000 kilometers. So it's not as if we have added a great deal after the independence. So there is this whole lot of these young engineers who actually braved a lot of difficulties in trying to lay the lines which was not within the call of the typical British call, raw material and product kind of connectivity. And that is the angle that we bring out in that chapter. I think that's a very, very valid question, because obviously, if you've been colonized by somebody for 200 years and you're trying to write a book eulogizing those colonizers, that is absurd. By the same token, to say that we would not have had any railways or civil services or education system or judicial services without Britishers, I think that's equally absurd. So, but in this book, we are not talking about the British Raj as a system. We are talking about youngsters who were 18 and 19, most of them at least, who came to India to make a career. They were coming 20,000 miles away. One visit home or one letter home and back will take about 6 months. They were landing in a place which had no roads, no rails, no air connectivities. They were in a land where the people looked different, dressed different, ate different, had different gods, had different food. Now, in the midst of all this, what is it in you that inspires you to go so beyond your normal capabilities? When interviewing a youngster today in the country, they would say, oh, I want a job in Bangalore because my parents are in Bangalore. Now, when you compare the two kinds of spirits, there is an inspirational story that underlies all these stories that we have put in this book, and that is broadly the purpose, the human spirit which goes well beyond its geographic or social background, where the best inside you must come out, almost like the bridge on River Kwai, where they were building a bridge for the enemies but wanted to do the best that they could. So it's that kind of an inspirational book. Yes, we do. We spell it out in the preface.